I want to go back full circle. So let's go back to Richmond when you were, as you said, hand of the keys. That was a failing branch, and you said there was probably some degree of nepotism going on there. So whoever was the manager before had brought in a lot of friends and family. What did you find specifically once you got there? And now we're talking about, was it operation systems? Was it the people? Was it the culture? And what were you advised to do, particularly from the mentors? Did you take action on your own, or did you go upstream to some of the mentors that you talked about to say, "Wow, I've got this on my hands"? And did they give you advice that you followed through on? I'm just curious as to how you implemented going forward with that Richmond branch.
It was a whale of a turnaround effort. I'm not going to lie. I kept a statistic from day one that I was there. And I realized that in 18 months, I had turned over 60% of the entire employment roll. That's a lot of hiring and firing.
You seem like such an amiable person. Was that hard for you to do, or did you just come in there and decide it's going to happen?
What's the old saying? When you got nothing left to lose.
Okay,
I'd like to think I'm a likable guy, but I'm also somebody that believes in leadership, believes in accountability, believes in delivering for results, and also believes in things like culture and supporting your teammates. And one doesn't go without the other. So I think early on, the operations piece was easy to fix. You can get the right people to give you a hand in doing that and get things done the right way. And that's an underpinning of the business. I don't even really count that, because without that, you've got nothing to fall back on. The culture piece is harder. And in a business that is a turnaround, culture matters a lot. David, I would tell you that culture is, if it's not one of your top two or three priorities in a healthcare setting, you're building a commodity service in a commodity world, and you shouldn't be surprised with commodity results.
right.
And what I mean by that is, if the people who work around you, work for you, and work with you don't believe in making a difference the second the phone rings from a prospective patient, or when they walked through the threshold of your door for the first time to see you, or the way that they're greeted and brought back to an operatory, or the way that you have like a note taking system that allows you to remember the conversation about their child and they took them to Disney World last time and how did the trip go, to humanize the experience and to really make them feel like they're the most valuable person on the planet. If that's not part of your focus, then what type of a business are we building? And why do we think our patients would value us any more than we value them? And I think that from a culture standpoint, you have to have that fabric. And so I worked hard on that early on. And where I couldn't fix it, I imported it. And there are people who aren't going to embrace your direction. They're not going to embrace the way you want things being done. They're always going to look over their shoulder and say, well, he or she did it differently when they ran the place. And there comes a point where, there's a great Herb Kelleher quote. The former CEO of Southwest Airlines passed away a number of years ago, but you probably remember him, swashbuckling
Oh
CEO
yes.
and
Oh
being a
yes.
Texan. I'm sure you have a lot more stories than I do. But for your audience, Herb Kelleher had this great quote that says, "You hire for attitude, you train for skill. You hire for attitude, you train for skill." And you and I both know that most people hire for skill. Can they do the job we're hiring them to do? And then you spend inordinate amounts of time trying to fix interpersonal attitudes and the lack of team cohesion. You got it all wrong. If you hire somebody who has the best attitude, a warm smile on their face, will do anything that you ask, is grateful for the opportunity, is going to make the impact with your patients when they walk through the door, you can teach them the skill.
Yes.
All right. You can teach them the skill. And sometimes when we spend too long with an employee that just doesn't get it and doesn't seem to care, that becomes a you problem, not a them problem, because that's baked in the cake that you can't solve. And you owe it to yourself to upgrade the talent on your team. And I did a lot of that in Richmond early on. I gave them direction. I started doing something called securing early wins. I worked with some of the key salespeople in the sales team, and address some of their most pressing customer issues and or help them win some new business, taught them a few new skills about some of the digital technology that was new back in the day that happened to be my forte that I could kind of bring some value very quickly on. And then all of a sudden, about 3 years in, I was sitting in my office one day. I used to be in the field half the time with people, and I would be in the office half the time. My phone would ring incessantly, and it was always the fire drill. It was the red phone call, right? Constant. I was sitting in my office one day about 3 years in, and I realized that the phone hadn't rung that day. And then I thought about it and I realized that the phone didn't ring the day before either. And I got worried because I could hear the phone ringing in the customer service department and in the tech service department and all that. So I thought there was something wrong with my phone. So I picked up the phone and called one of my equipment specialists and I said, I'm going to hang up. Can you call me back on my direct line? I think there's something wrong with my phone. Well, I hung up. Ted called. I picked up the phone. It was him. The phone worked just fine. And Ted said, what's your problem? And I said, well, I'm kind of worried because my phone isn't ringing and I don't know what's going on. And he said, well, I'm out here co-traveling with Jeannie right now. Everything's fine. Like we're doing what you hired us to do, you dummy. And that's when you realize that the people you pick and the people you hire for the right attitude, you coach and develop and you turn them loose. And when they start creating results that are greater than what you can create for yourself and for the business overall, you've reached a different level of leadership at that point. And I would tell you there's nothing more rewarding than seeing the people you pick achieving the results that you asked them to deliver. It's unbelievably gratifying.